Hey, how is everybody? Well, this is the finale of Godkiller. Um, this is it. This is going to be the last time I streamed Godkiller online, but um, I'll have a new story tomorrow. So I wanted to go over Godkiller from beginning to end. Let's see. So first of all, I'm going to make it a little bigger. Okay, there we go. That's better. And I want to discuss a little bit the origins of this story, and really the world the world that this story is set in. Um, yeah. So a God killer is part of what I call the post-human condition. Oh boy. Okay. Anyways, God killer is part of the post-human condition, and the post-human condition is my take on H.P. Lovecraft. Yeah. Now Lovecraft. Yeah. So a Lovecraft created what was called the Cthulhu mythos, and it's important to understand that he was writing in a tradition of weird fantasy and horror. You know, so for example, there was Robert Chambers before him, and Lord Dunsany, who did weird fantasy, and a lot of other people. You can see influences from Edgar Allan Poe. Um, okay. Yeah. So, but what Lovecraft brought to the table um, was 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 a metaphor for modern life. Now, keep in mind this is 100 years ago, but there were two big metaphors. One, the new science of Albert Einstein and those other physicists who were just tearing apart Newtonian physics, um, and so Lovecraft had that in his story in the form of gods and aliens who were so different from us that to try to understand them, to even see them, would drive us mad. And the other part was his was people of different races mixing, you know, and Lovecraft also, unfortunately, feared that and feared other races in general. Well, to be fair, he was attracted to them, and he was scared and disgusted. And at that time, by the way, different races didn't just mean blacks and whites. It also meant people from Eastern Europe, the Irish, Asians, everybody who was not white Anglo-Saxon Protestant was different. And to have those people mixing with his people was something that he didn't care for. And it made it into his fiction in the form of fears of aliens and humans interbreeding. Yeah. So, and so those were Lovecraft's fears, and you can tell, by the way, that that his fears, like the fears that animate a lot of horror writers, are conservative in nature, reaction you could call Lovecraft a reactionary, literally reacting to modernism, well, to postmodernism. So he was reactionary, and in his case, he was also flat out racist, even for his time. You know, at least he held racist opinions. Yeah, I've read other people that have said that despite those opinions, he was polite to everybody he met. So I don't know. You know, we don't have video. You know, there's no way to test Lovecraft's soul now. But what's undisputed is that Lovecraft, as a writer, you know, took these fears and gave them life in his stories. So much life that 100 years later, almost 100 years later, people are taking his fears and, to my mind, you know, I hate to say it, but they often turn them into zombies. You know, well, that is my metaphor. And what I mean by that is that those were Lovecraft's fears. You know, and so then, what happens if you don't fear the postmodern world like he did? What happens if, as I did, if you grew up with Einstein's theories, you know, in science fiction, in science classes, being discussed by people that you knew? And what happens if it just doesn't freak you out? You know, what happens if you're not simultaneously attracted to and repulsed by people of other races? You know, and then you start reading Lovecraft stuff, and don't get me wrong, it's frightening, but it's his frights. And then what if you start writing? And what if you want to start writing horror stories? While Lovecraft was so seductive in writing his horror stories, you might make the mistake let's see. Oh, hello. McGlenn, hello. So Lovecraft is so seductive in his fears. He told such a great horror story that you might decide this is what horror stories are supposed to be like. You know, and I think that this is a downside of a lot of great writers. You know, another example is Tolkien, who created the great Lord of the Rings. And one of the things that happens in Lord of the Rings is that there's a lot of traveling, just a lot of traveling. But Tolkien loved to write that travel narrative. You know, he was good at it. You know, possibly because he had some experience with it in real life. You know, having been to war, having lived in a couple different continents. You know, and maybe he just liked that stuff. You know, but I remember reading the first book, because I didn't read the second, in the Wheel of Time series, and I remember that Robert Jordan takes us from one small town to another, and he describes the small towns in pretty much the exact same way. You know, and I'm thinking, this is a guy who doesn't love to describe small towns. Why is he doing this? Because he loved Tolkien. Tolkien described all these areas, therefore Jordan must do the same thing. Thinks Jordan, or thinks Jordan's editor. You know, who knows who's responsible for that decision. Yeah. So let's see, who else? When Alan Moore and Frank Miller wrote some really dark, bleak comics in the 80s, Batman: The Dark Knight Returns, Watchmen, The Killing Joke, their combined influence was pretty terrible, even though the actual works are great, because all people took from their works was, you know, it should be dark. You know, they missed the underlying themes of these works. You know, all they saw was dark, gritty, violent. sociopathic heroes. So now going back to Lovecraft, if you're going to write a horror story, you should ask yourself what really scares you. You know, and the truth is that I'm not sure if I'm writing horror. Yeah, Godkiller seems to be more action to me. But another story that I wrote, Burlap Daughter, seems more like horror. And that's because what I fear more than anything else, is not the dark, it's people. Zulurpy, hello. Good to see you. Zulurpy, I took Journey's advice, and I'm giving people some time to come in. So and thank you very much. I like Ogre in the Shoebox too. Yeah. But at the same time, I'm not sure that I can write like a true horror story, because I think I'm a little too hopeful. Like in Burlap Daughter, there's a happy ending. I mean, it's a well-earned happy ending on that character's part, but there's a happy ending. And Ogre in the Shoebox, for example, the bad guy dies. So even though I like to take things to like a really dark place, I like to pull back a little bit too, because I guess that's how I see life, So anyways, this is Godkiller. This is the last time that you'll see it on stream. We're going to go through the whole damn thing. Okay. So yeah. So anyways, going back to Lovecraft, why am I talking about Lovecraft? Because I'm intrigued by modern physics. I'm not scared by it, and and I like humanity. I like people of all races. So so Lovecraft stuff, to me, instead of being about fear, should be, for me, it's more science fiction. It's more, what if there were alien gods, and what if they had like an effect on the world, but the world continues, So I want to see what happens, and that to me is an impulse behind science fiction. What happens next? Here's this thing that happens to the world. What's the consequence of that? Yeah. So, without any further ado, here is Godkiller. I put the new stuff in red. I changed everything else to black, and I put the new stuff in red. But what I did a little different this time is that this new stuff that I put in, sometimes it's just a matter of reworking old stuff and putting it in a different place. So I'm starting Godkiller with like an italicized little bit of dialogue, like I started Burlap Daughter. And I think I might be doing that a lot with these stories set in this universe, because I really have a lot of exposition to get out there. And I like starting with a little quote. So here it is. I had one of those dreams again, Cray said to Victor as they shared a joint. I was like a shark or an octopus, some kind of sea monster, swimming through space, and I swam through the moon like it wasn't there. And when I got to Earth, and I ate everything I wanted, crabs, ferns, and dinosaurs, you name it. But then I slowed down and I stopped, and it was like I was drowning alive, but like I'd never die. Deep, Victor said. Okay. Yeah. So, um, if you've been with me for a while, you've seen pretty much that dialogue over and over again. Except that Crace tells it to Helene, and now he's telling it to Victor. Um, I wanted to make Crace a little more human. Not just this force of nature, but a character who's a little more relatable. So you meet. So yeah, he's smoking a joint. And who's Victor? Um, it's okay when we get to the Victor part, I'll remind you of who Victor is. Um, yeah, but yeah. So I wanted that dream. Well, here's the other thing about that dream. Um, the dream is a little silly, but it's also pretty accurate. You know, um, it's what happens, and that's why they're smoking pot. There's a little silliness there. Victor, you know, is the deep kind of sarcastic, just a little bit. Okay. Yeah. So let's look at this. The noise of the fireworks and the nighttime crowd at Greater Disney swore in the back alley where Crace and Haleen were supposed to meet. Yo, Haleen, Crace is here, Charlie yelled, pronouncing Haleen almost correctly. Charlie was a lookout for Helene, who sold guns illegally in the shadows of Greater Disney, and Charlie worshipped Crace, who in Charlie's imagination was a killer who took no shit. How did that survive? Who took no shit, who made meat of men, who lived by a code like a samurai or a ninja, who strode the back streets of Florida like a god, albeit a flesh and blood god. Not one of those inscrutable alien gods had revealed themselves a generation ago. Yeah. All right. So, see, this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Ta-da! Exposition. But at least it's Charlie thinking about it and not the author telling you, here's a list of the shit you need to know. Crace had parked his car in a side street and strutted toward the alley. He was a large man, dark and muscled, dressed in Florida casual with white slacks, white shoes, no socks, and wearing a white guayabera, untucked. Of course, untucked. Sorry. If you ever order that shirt, that's how you got to wear it, untucked. At each hip, he had a gun. When he heard Charlie's cry, he smiled. Okay. Helene's van was already coming around, backing into the alley. Helene came around and saw Charlie. Think you're going to meet Crace? Get the fuck out. Charlie ran, and Helene opened the back door of the van, revealing an array of weapons. Crace came around. Shit, Crace said, rubbing his eyes, scanning Helene's guns, packed carefully in dark boxes, some black plastic, some metallic, all with neat labels, but one stood out, a gun in a wooden box, a beautiful stained piece of old strong wood, and carved into it was a sigil, a circle made of two abstracted guns opposite each other, like yin and yang. Sorry, where did you get this one? Asked Crace. Shit, Crace, that one is cursed. How's that? Are you ready for this shit? Crace nodded. Jimmy owed me money, so he called me. Told me he had a one-of-a-kind gun that would cover the debt. I prayed it would, because otherwise I'd have to hurt Jimmy. But I thought it was more of his bullshit. But then I thought, what the hell? Later that night, I drove to his place out in the country. I didn't have to knock. The house was knocked down. There were parts of Jimmy everywhere, and I thought I heard buzzing, like wasps or yellow jackets. So I grabbed the gun in the case, and the gun felt hot and clammy, like when you have a fever. Then I ran, and I heard the buzzing until I put it in the gun case. So do you still want it? It sounds just like what I need, Helene. Good. The sooner I get it out of my possession, the better. Let me open it, Crace said. Okay. Now, there's some stuff established here. Came around to repeat it. Oh, God damn it. Ah, well. I'll look at it again later, Zilerpi. Uh, it's hard to keep track of the document and the chat at the same time. Um, yeah, and also keep in mind, this is just a rough draft. I'm happy with. You know, there's more polishing. There's more polishing to do. Um, like one thing I'm thinking about is that it seems pretty clear that Helene and Crace are completely okay with supernatural shit, which makes sense in this world, but I might have to establish that a little better. But anyways, Helene pointed at. Sorry, that's fine. Helene pointed at the wooden box, but she would not touch it. Crace took it and opened it. Inside was what at first glance was a Mars pistol, a large, overly complex semi-automatic pistol of which only prototypes existed. Yeah. Good, let me tell you, it's hard describing this goddamn Mars pistol. Yeah, I should be like, hey, have you ever played BioShock? I think that was the game that it was in. It's like the gun in BioShock. You know, hello, Bobby. Yeah. Yeah. So, anyways, this is one of the hard things. Exposition. The exposition of the pistol. I must describe it. You know. Yeah. Anyways, Crace smiled. He loved the ridiculous things and owned one of them, but he had never dared to fire it. He didn't mind the recoil, great as it was supposed to be, and he didn't even mind the reported backwards action if he were to fire it. That's just smoke and noise, and Crace was willing to suffer it. His real fear was that the gun would be ruined. And now, here was another one. Which of the 80 prototypes was this? It was a strange one, that's for sure. He had studied the weapon, but this one was unlike the others. This is an ornate weapon, unlike the plain prototypes he had seen and read about. It was engraved with curves that became black voids through which blacker stars shone. And when he ran his fingers over the curves, they were indeed hot and wet, like blood spilling out of a wound. He remembered cutting a dog's throat once, one hand slitting its throat, the other hand holding its head, his body on top of the dog's body, holding it down, himself covered in sweat and dog's blood. After that, shooting his target had been anticlimactic. With this gun, to use it would be thrilling. Gods, he should kill someone. He took the gun out of its case and held it. He heard the buzzing too. It wasn't insects, it was the stars. It felt right. Helene had her back. Oh boy. Helene had her back to him. She was distracted by some shit Charlie was pulling. So he tapped Helene on the shoulder with the barrel of the gun and pointed it at her. That felt right too. How much, he asked. She knew she was dead. Crace could see it in her eyes. It's yours if I never see you again, asshole. Okay, that's better. All right. Good last words, Helene, Crace said, pronouncing her name correctly. But then the buzzing became, oh boy, more louder. Became louder, and Crace looked up. Helene jumped into her van, not even bothering to close the back door, and started to drive away. Crace pointed the gun first at the fleeing Helene, but then at the night sky, at Orion, the source of the buzzing. Bang, he said. He fired the gun at Orion. There was a loud boom in the night sky, and all the beautiful fireworks went dark, and everything went dark, like light, by the way, as if light didn't exist anymore. Crace could still see, as if in a fog, and the buzzing in Crace's head continued and abated, but he was more concerned that the gun was out of ammunition. Crace walked to his car, ignoring the confused cries and screams of frightened people, and drove to an empty parking lot. There he examined the magazine and the barrel. Both were engraved with sigils. Both had whorls that disappeared into infinite darkness, including the length of the interior barrel and the inside of the magazine itself. None of the ammunition he had, not even the ammunition that would work with other Mars pistols, would make sense to such a gun. This weapon was stranger than these strange days, he thought. Okay, so here I have this. I finally have some more new stuff, and the reason I did that is because this had ended here, and then I skipped all the way to, hey, he had to go to Stray Thoughts to see Herman. So I wanted to explain the Herman stuff. Like, why does he want to go to see Herman? What's so important? And the important thing about Herman is that Herman is like Chris. You know, there's something different about each of them. So, you know, oh, what the hell? I'll just spoil it since you guys have heard this before. You know, they both come from the same alien god. They're both born from it. You know, like Athena born from Zeus's brow or something. So yeah, so I had to write about that. He was born with the strange days, with the arrival of the gods. His first memory, he staggered naked out of the foam of the waves, breaking on a clear water beach. He knew nothing about himself. Authorities assumed he was traumatized, since a lot of people were at that time. They gave him a life, and at first he tried to live it. Okay. I got too poetic with they gave him a life. What I meant was, like, they gave him, like, you know, a place to stay, ID, that kind of thing, you know, but whatever. At first he tried to live it. He went to the Dolly Museum. By the way, guys, that's in St. Petersburg, if it still exists. He went to the Dolly Museum. Oh my gosh, Phil. Ugh. Saw Venus de Milo with drawers, and some know-it-all had explained everything about Venus, including her being born out of the surf. That was how he had met Victor, who laughed at him about that. Hey, you remember it was a god severed balls that caused that foam, right? That is true. Venus was born, I believe, from Uranus's severed balls. So that's pretty funny. All right. Let's see. But he and Victor had broken up. He kept having terrible dreams and worse urges. He was surrounded by something, and more than that, he knew he wasn't human. He could pretend, but he was a predator among them. Faster, tougher, with no real attachments. He was like a barracuda amongst a school of silvery fish. Let me tell you, I tried looking up what barracuda eat, and everybody says silvery fish. Like, nobody says, like, this particular kind of fish. I'm going to have to do some more research. Sorry. He'd met one person like himself, Herman, a sly, large man who ran a shop called Stray Thoughts. But there were differences. Herman had once said, I'm not driven like you, my friend. Have you ever considered that you really were created from the balls of a dead god? Yeah. That was who he had to see. He had to go to Stray Thoughts, see Herman. Yeah. And I'd like to point out something about the way I write. I'm going to have to go back to this red part and put more stuff in it. That is my process. I start skimpy, and then I got to add. And I'm finding that it helps, like, to read, not just to read it out loud, but to read it out loud with an audience. There's a difference between reading it out loud to your cat who doesn't give a shit, or reading it out loud to people who are listening and thinking, okay, what are they going to make of this? Yeah. In that way, I kind of join the audience. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm happy with this red section that I gave Crace some more background. But I still need to fill in some blanks in there. Okay. Anyways, he had to go to Stray Thoughts, see Herman. Crace put the gun away in its case and started driving. What? McGlenn, one of us, yes. Crace put the gun away in its case and started driving. There is no easy way to find stray thoughts. It was always in the back roads, someplace so remote that it had never been electronically mapped, and those few who had been there more than once, Grace among them, would swear that it was never in the same place twice. Herman, the owner, kept it in Florida, but that was it. There were lots of lost places in Florida, and Herman liked that. Grace drove to where Stray Thoughts had last been, saw that the lot was empty, drove away, and called Herman, who answered before the first ring. So you need bullets, my friend. That is why you want to come to my little store? Okay, now look at this. Herman is fucking psychic. Yes. Grace, my friend, don't come. I can't stop you, but don't come all the same. Where are you now? You know you can find me. It was true. Grace was driving automatically, making turns he was not aware of, but feeling closer to the store as he drove. All right, now that is also like something, again, that tells us that Grace is just not a normal guy. I thought you'd be happy for me, Grace said. You're a double, but I'm lonely. Grace pulled up to the store. It was a large country house with a decrepit sign that said Stray Thoughts. And okay, I'd like to point out something before we go through this entire section again. Because I've made it clear that Grace and Herman know each other, that they've had, conversations about who they are. It's not like Grace is just visiting some dude he knows. There's a closer connection. So anyways, Grace pulled up to the store. It was a large country house with a decrepit sign that said Stray Thoughts. There were small knickknacks on the front porch. Among them, heretical idols of fish-headed fertility goddesses, dragonflies carrying babies, worms that could be mistaken for penises or vice versa. It was hard to tell. These idols were important to now extinct cults and the scholars who studied them, and they were all available at a reasonable price, $5 each or $5 for $20. Grace stepped into the shop. It was well lit and stuffed, oh boy, with curios, diaries of forgotten spree killers, the photo album of a prominent family destroyed by accusations of abuse and incest, the dirty cotton bra of a streetwalker killed by a drunk driver, a police chief, a videotape of his drinking confession, and many more. Each item had a card that explained its circumstance and provenance. Oh, look, technically, let's see. All right. Behind the counter was Herman. It's Lurpy, thank you. Yeah. So behind the counter was Herman. He was nearly a giant, over 7 feet tall, over 500 pounds, and his skin was pale and truly white, except for patterns of blue and violet. He shuffled his bulky frame around, bumped into empty boxes, nearly tripped over the cat litter, and rummaged through a metal cabinet. Grace saw Herman's cat, Grimalkin, on the counter, next to a bag of cat snacks. Grimalkin was an old gray thing, long of body and thin, but he had caught and killed a rat, whose little head was next to the snacks. Grimalkin stared at Grace, who fed the cat a few snacks. Are we going to talk business, Herman, or should I do business with Grimalkin? Grace, you're too good to that cat. He did his job, Grace said, pointing at the severed head of a dead rat. Okay, guess what? This awesome line, I'm really thinking of cutting it. and here's, let's see. Okay. Here's why I'm thinking of cutting that line. In the previous draft, like when I wrote it, Grace said it to threaten Herman, to establish that Grace was dominant. But that's not how I see things anymore. Grace really wants the bullets out of respect or friendship or something like that. Since I established that they've known each other before, that they've had these conversations, now that line seems unnecessarily aggressive. Yeah, it's a great line. I'll have to save it for something else. Um, yeah. Okay. He did his job, Crace said, pointing at the severed head of a dead rat. At the severed head. Herman motioned with his right arm at his store. I do have a rodent problem. I have too many items, and I find such fascinating curios. Don't you think, Crace? This is my life's work, collecting the strange and unusual. Sell me the gun, Crace. I'll pay you well for it. Yeah. Um, I'd rather buy the bullets if it's the same to you. No, it's not. Have you ever considered being your own man, not following these impulses? Yeah. Okay, so here's the new line, and it's one of the things that establishes that they know each other well enough that Crace must have talked about those impulses to Herman before. I never think about that stuff. And yet here you are, and here I am, and you want the bullets for the deadliest weapon in the world. Why is that even important? I kill, I'm a killer. You've got a point. The impulses aren't mine, but so what? I can't stop feeling them, Herman. I almost killed Helene. Now here, oh, so Helene knows these people. I figured if she knew Crace, maybe she knows Herman. But she's okay, asked Herman, as he reached under the display and tried to grab his shotgun. And again, I might have to expand this a little bit. Maybe I need like one line in between here. But in my mind, Herman feels the threat. He doesn't need Crace to say that shit about the cat. You know, Herman feels the Crace. Herman feels the threat. So Herman reaches under the display and tries to grab a shotgun. Crace is faster. He pushed the display case over onto Herman's legs. Herman buckled and fell. The shotgun slid just out of his reach. Crace reached for it, but Herman was faster. He grasped it, swung it around, and Crace kicked. But Crace kicked it out of his hand. Herman's giant hand, let's see, giant left hand grabbed Crace's leg and brought him crashing down. Crace felt a panic as if he were drowning. Herman was thrashing, trying to stand up, and he was thrashing Crace too. Crace reached out for something to steady himself with, and instead he got the shotgun. Let's see. He brought it around. Okay. He brought it around, fired, no aim, just a lucky shot that tore into the giant's neck. Herman sputtered. Blue blood sprayed from Herman's neck. Oh, okay, that's new. As if Herman were part octopus. He stared dumbly at Crace and collapsed. Okay. Now, I used to say that Herman died, but then later in the scene, he's alive. So here, he just takes a really bad hit to the neck, which would kill most anybody, but he's got blue blood. You know, what else is different about Herman? Crace left Herman's body in the toppled display cabinet and went into the back room. Even there, everything was weird, creepy, and labeled. A baby with one large central eye dead, preserved in formaldehyde, a wizard's grimoire fashioned out of the skin of his children. Crace thought he heard it moan. A mirror that reflected one's regrets, supposedly, since Crace did not look in it. But there was one normal thing. A large cabinet, metallic, tan paint, so blandly out of place in this storage room of horrors. It was locked, but Crace forced it open. Some of the contents spilled out. Markers, stickers, note cards, tacks, and other office supplies. Crace rummaged through what was left. He overturned a basket at the bottom of the cabinet. Printer paper spilled out, but so did a dingy golden box, 4 inches wide, 7 inches long, 2 inches deep, with symbols like 2 long revolvers turned upon themselves inscribed on it. Boo! Sorry. All that ancient stuff. All right. The box contained a large tarot deck, also yellow, with card backs that matched the design on the box. The cards were held snugly by a padded piece of wood. He picked up the cards, and they felt hot and clammy, like power ran through them. Crace set them aside and lifted the piece of wood. There was nothing there. Cray sat at a small table and turned the cards over, one by one, as if he were counting ammo or knives. Indeed, the suits were guns, knives, bullets, and nightmares, represented by a leering moon. The first major arcana he turned over was a man on a bed, his throat pierced, the bed and room bloody. A drop of blood fell from the card onto the table. The title of the card was Victor. Crace looked at the mirror. He saw the fight again, tried to turn away, but the mirror held his gaze. Crace on the bed. Victor walks in, gets in the bed. Crace, bigger by far, pushes him off. Come on, Victor said, don't be like that. Crace shouts, who the fuck let you in? I just wanted to surprise you. Didn't answer my question. Fuck it, Crace remembered thinking. One last kiss, Victor says, and I'll tell you. Crace grabs his knife and stabs Victor in the heart. Blood sprays everywhere. Okay. Let's see. The mirror went red. Crace told the police that some faggot had tried to rape him in bed, some practical joke gone wrong, and he was only defending himself. His friends covered for him, saying things like, Vic was always like that. He drifted out of their lives, stopped making friends after that. Herman had thought they were friends. Helene did too. Crace thought about that and threw the cards against the wall. Okay. So by putting Victor up front as the person he tells the dream to, it makes this scene with Victor over here, this terrible memory, it gives this terrible memory more weight, and I think that's pretty important, In fact, speaking of that, because that I'm going to keep on revising this a little more. I'm definitely going to have to add like a little backstory about Helene and Crace, just a little bit, So anyways, he throws the cards against the wall. He heard a sound he knew well, the rattling of loose pieces of ammunition. He ran to the wall and he saw that some of the minor arcana had lost their bullets and were blank. And oh, what bullets. Curved at impossible angles, dark, heavy, inlaid with ivory, smelling of the ocean. These were the bullets, and 6 had come loose. He took the deck, the box, and the bullets, and walked back into the front of the store. He heard shuffling. See, I didn't have the shuffling part before either, but it's these little things. Like in Jurassic Park, when you see that glass of water, tremble, it's sometimes you need foreshadowing just the moment before something happens. It's not always like 5 pages ago that you need foreshadowing. Sometimes you need it right there. So Herman did not look like himself, but more Herman, Herman did not look like himself, but more like a semi-aquatic mutant. Like an albino walrus with tentacles instead of flippers. He was still trapped by the case that had fallen on him, and perhaps his own form, which is not suited to land. Crace, said Herman. That is not dead, which can eternal lie, and all that. Okay, so Crace is quoting from Lovecraft. That is not dead, which can eternal lie, and in strange eons, even death may die. All right. So when that's also a little new piece. Initially, I stopped the quote there, but I just went for the whole thing. The whole first line. Herman reached out with barbed tentacles that seemed to grow longer and larger at will. That's also a new part. And Herman began chanting some incantation. Crace was not a magician, but he knew words of power. He knew words of power when he heard them. Most of this is actually near or close enough to it. So let me mark that for myself. Okay. Crace ran through the store toward the door. Shadows lengthened and deepened, and Crace felt as if he might never make it to the door. Herman seemed to be lifted upright by an invisible force, and membranous wings grew from his back. Crace loaded the magazine of the Mars pistol with a bullet. Herman stared at the fallen case, and it flew at Crace, pushing Crace into the window display where there were two toys. One, Herman as he was now, and the other, Crace. Let's see. Yeah. So I initially had like a whole diorama of like the volcano and the monster buried in it and all that stuff. I'm like, no, screw that. You know, that's too much. The toys are not a bad idea, you know, but too much of that description takes away from this fight. Crace thought better of shooting Herman while both were in the store. He broke the window and jumped out. He aimed his gun at the store and the giant being in it, but before he could shoot, the store imploded, like it had been sucked into a black hole. Crace ran to his car, and heeding an unknown instinct, he did not look back. Instead, he peeled out. All that was left of the store was a sign that said "Stray Thoughts," and underneath it, 3 new words written in vain. Fuck you, Crace. Okay, so this stuff is, you know, how does Herman move the store? I guess that's one way. Herman survives. Journey wanted Crace to survive this story, and I'm fine with that. But I liked Herman, and I wanted Herman to survive too. You know, yeah. So he's hurt and he's angry, and he's always been a little malicious. So if I ever visit Crace again, you know, I think Herman might fuck with him. So. Crace drove away fast, his mind racing for the first time in a long while. Crace was active, not reflective. He fought, he fucked, he killed, he stole, he ate, and he slept. He'd always felt sorry for people who spent their time lost in thought, but now he was thinking of his cruelty to Victor and Herman and Helene and so many others, including himself. That was it, wasn't it? Let's see. The impulses were a cruelty visited upon him. He either went along with them or suffered terrible migraines. It was as if he were being trained by a harsh master toward an unknown end. Okay. And again, it's important for Crace to figure some shit out. In previous drafts, I had Herman all but telling him, you know, hey, you know, some god wants you to kill him. Well, you know, Herman was doing a little too much telling. He pulled over to a shady set of trees, rolled down his windows, and stopped the car. He drew the deck out of its box and flipped through the cards quickly, and then fanned them. They blurred and became a series of moving images. He recognized them. It was his dream. A great beast with a large mouth and rows of jagged teeth, and a cylindrical purple body with tentacles flew through the cosmos and landed on Earth. An old Earth, and the energy of its landing caused a great mushroom-shaped cloud of fire and lightning and dust, and from that cloud sprang terrible storms, and the ground shook where the beast had landed, and the earth was wounded, and it bled lava, and the yellow molten rock turned upon itself and formed a mountain, and the beast reveled in the chaos, and the beast ate the flesh of the dead and the terror of the living, and when the great beast was sated, it went to the mountain and saw a great lake at its heart, and it dove in, and it fell asleep and turned the waters as black as the stars of its birth. But when it tried to wake, it could not, and instead it was in torment, neither dead nor alive, and after a time, its thoughts invaded the world, and one of those, the strongest, was this: I want to die. And that thought became flesh, and now it had to return home. Crace scattered the cards. Then he loaded the magazine with the remaining bullets, inserted the magazine back into the pistol, pointed the pistol at his head. I don't want to think anymore, he said out loud, to no one, to the universe. But he could not pull the trigger. He tried pointing the gun at his car engine, but he could not pull that trigger either. Instead, he felt pulled west to where the beast, the god, lay in eternal tormented slumber. Fine, thought Crace, let's do it. He started the car, rolled up the windows, and drove to Clearwater, Florida, to Pier 66. So I'm looking at this scene again, and I wanted to strike a balance between Crace understanding things and the reader understanding things. So I hope I got it right. I hope that it's clear to the reader that Crace is that thing, is that thought made flesh, the I want to die thought. Oh yeah, Bobby. So so if we go back to this part here, this god who's neither dead nor alive, that is, it's basically in a coma, and it hates it. So its thoughts invaded the world, and one of those, the strongest, was this: I want to die. And that thought became flesh, and now I have to return home. So Crace is that thought. He is that suicidal impulse of the god. And so all the other impulses he gets stem from the god wanting to die, because that was the purpose of Crace's creation, to kill the god. Yeah. That, by the way, is why he can't kill himself. At least not until his task is complete. Yeah. So Crace made it to the Clearwater beach. Crace made it to the Clearwater beach as the sun was setting. The breeze carried the scent of salt, sweat, lotion, and the vendors and performers were packing up. Crace found a caricature artist and offered him $100 for some paper and inks. I initially had Crace going to Eckerd's and whatever. I think that, this is tighter. Paper and inks in hand, he strode onto the pier, past the gift shop, paid his $1, went through the gate, and walked to the end of the pier. He looked at the gun, held it, gazed at its eddies and whirls, at the black stars in its unnatural angles, and he remembered the ocean, the blind depths from where he came, the crush of the thick gelid waters, the bioluminescent giants, relics from another age, kept alive by what Crace refused to remember, the great god, the great beast, the thing at the bottom of the depths, the being that sent him the impulses. Oh, there's your answer. All this he drew, a mix of an expressionist painting and an old map that showed dragons and the end of the world. The spirals of the map shifted in the twilight, and the space around Crace shifted similarly. And Crace was moved, folded into two dimensions, then one, then expanded into many, like he was being ripped through a set of funhouse mirrors. Now he remembered. This is what it felt like to be torn out of a god, to be given a name and cast out with a terrible purpose, to be drawn back by that same purpose. Now he saw the god beast he had sprung from, a massive thing, its resting place buried by the ocean and the passage of time. Crace was stretched thin, so thin that he was able to enter the giant with ease. Now he was blind, heavy, large, asleep yet not asleep. He was joined again with the god, and yet still he was Crace. The mind of the great beast was an ocean, massive, dark, and full of alien beings. The stray thoughts of the beast, the swimmers in his mind, and they stared at Crace, the stranger in their midst, and they beckoned to him, these thoughts that had not found expression in untold millennia, these mad thoughts that had devoured their brothers and sisters, and that wanted the taste of something new. Crace felt their lust and opened his eyes, and drew himself together and drew the gun. All the mad thoughts stopped, paralyzed. Crace pointed to the gun where he thought the head was. "Show yourself," he screamed. But nothing came forward. Crace pointed the gun at each of the mad thoughts and demanded the same thing. "Show yourself." But nothing came forward. Crace pointed the gun at his own head, and said, "Show yourself." And nothing did. "I'll just leave," Cray screamed, and he heard a low cry, the weight of the madness of eons of a great mind devouring itself, aware of its madness, helpless to stop it, the shame of a proud god reduced to a feeble state. A terrible pity took over Crace, and he fired the gun, not once, but 5 times, each time in a different direction. I need something here. I need one more sentence, or a couple more sentences. What happens? I get there's more. I know I have another section, but I'm just saying I need something more. Okay. The stars were right, and a god died. A great island rose out of the Gulf of Mexico, and that island had a great volcano at the center, an ancient massive structure that should have been worn smooth by water and time, but was jagged and beautiful, like a dagger at the throat of the sky. Where much of its interior mass had been, there was a caldera, a lake, and it was full of a black boiling liquid. And inside that black lake was a great beast, a god that had once roamed the universe, bringing death and madness wherever it went. Now dead. Black ichor poured from its wounds, poured out of the caldera into the waters around it, and where the ichor hit the world, it was young again. The island had risen up with the volcano was ancient too, but now great beasts roamed the island. Their scales were striped in reds and yellows with a base of green. Let's see. Over a base of green. Isn't that better? Just like the floor of the island. And some were covered in similarly hued feathers, and their cries could be heard from the deltas of the American South and the white beaches of western Florida. And from some part of Mexico. I'm going to have to include Mexico. So, sorry, Bobby. And their steps shook the earth. There came a great yowl from the caldera, and even the beast stopped. Rising out of the lake, covered in the blood of a god, screaming in pain as if newly born, was a naked man, large and powerful. He climbed and jumped to the top of the volcano and screamed again, and the whole world heard him. Oh yeah, Bobby. That's pretty much what I was thinking. Yeah. So while this isn't, in its final state, I'm pretty happy with it overall. And there's just like small things I got to do. Yeah. And but that is pretty much it for this story. Tomorrow I start. I start with a new story, or rather, an old story that I've been wanting to rework. So that's pretty much it. Remember to go to Picarto. It corrected me to Picasso. God damn it, Picarto. Here, screw you, automatic corrections on chat. All right, Picarto. Go to Picarto and let's watch Journey Draw. I think he's going to be on Picarto, right? All right, guys. Good night. I'll see you on Picarto. Oh, it's Twitch. God damn it. All right, Twitch or Picarto, whichever one. Good night.